Welcome to Life Stories, where we share powerful journeys of resilience, betrayal, and triumph. Today's story is one of heartbreak, manipulation, and the strength to rise from the ashes. Sophia, a woman whose life was turned upside down by those closest to her, faces the ultimate betrayal by her fiancé and sister. But in the midst of despair, she discovers her own strength and takes control of her destiny. Stay with us as we unfold this gripping tale of betrayal, revenge, and personal redemption. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to start today's story with us. It was meant to be the kind of day that would change my life for the better. The day I would return from a business trip and finally see everything fall into place. I was coming back to a future that was supposed to be perfect. My wedding was on the horizon. And my fiancé, Ryan, was everything I could have hoped for. My life was full of promise. Little did I know that when I stepped into my apartment that evening, it would mark the beginning of my greatest betrayal. I was exhausted from the long flight, but I felt a strange sense of eagerness as I opened the door to my apartment. The air was heavy, but it wasn't with the typical scent of my home, no. It was something unmistakably sweeter. A warm vanilla aroma lingered in the air, one that I immediately recognized. It was my sister Megan's signature fragrance. Something was wrong, and I felt it deep in my gut. I set my suitcase down, still trying to shake off the sense of dread crawling up my spine. The feeling only grew when I noticed the familiar emptiness of the apartment. Something was out of place. I walked into my room, and the first thing that hit me was the absence of my wedding dress, which should have been hanging in the closet. I froze. That was the moment I knew something terrible had happened. I stared at the empty space where my wedding dress had been hanging for weeks. For a second, I hoped it was a mistake. But deep down, I knew better. Something was wrong, something I couldn't explain. Yet the air felt thick with the kind of tension you couldn't ignore. Before I could even think of what to do next, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a message from Jessica, my best friend, and her words hit me harder than I could have ever expected. Sophia, her text read, "You need to sit down." There was something in her message, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. Her tone was off, different from anything I had heard before. It wasn't the usual lightheartedness. No, it was filled with an undercurrent of caution, maybe even fear. My heart began to race. I texted back immediately. "What's happening, Jess?" I didn't have to wait long for her response. She called me almost instantly. Her voice steady, yet laced with a warning I could hear even through the phone. "Sophia, Amelia and Ryan got married yesterday. In your wedding dress." Her words were like a slap across my face. I stood there, stunned, not knowing how to process what I was hearing. I could feel the tears starting to build behind my eyes. But I wouldn't let them fall, not yet. I clenched the phone tighter in my hand, trying to steady myself. My throat closed up as the confusion set in. Are you serious?" I whispered, unable to believe what she was saying. Jessica paused for a moment before responding, her voice softer now. "It's all over social media. I tried reaching you earlier, but the flight delay, I thought you were already aware." And there it was, the unthinkable. Ryan, my fiancé, and Megan, my sister, had done the one thing I never imagined possible. They had walked down the aisle together, in front of friends, family, and strangers alike, while I had been out of the loop, busy with work and the life I had thought was moving forward smoothly. The pieces started to fall into place. I thought back to Ryan's recent coldness, to Megan's sudden obsession with the details of my wedding, the way she seemed more involved than necessary. The way she had insisted I go on this trip even though it felt like everything was spiraling out of control. I had been blind to it all. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my breathing. My hands trembled as I hung up with Jessica, my thoughts in chaos. I opened Instagram, my fingers moving almost mechanically. There they were, photos of Megan, smiling, wearing my wedding dress, clinging to Ryan, their smiles so wide, their happiness so complete. The caption underneath one photo stung like salt in a fresh wound. "When you just know it's right. Sorry sis. Love won't wait." I laughed bitterly, the sound echoing in my empty apartment. A laugh that wasn't even from humor. It was a sound born of disbelief, of pain, and something darker that was beginning to rise in my chest. The world around me seemed to spin as I looked at their perfect little moment. So oblivious to the devastation they had caused. But the worst part wasn't even the dress. It wasn't just the heartbreak of seeing my fiancé and my sister together. Something that should have been mine. No, the worst part was that I had been so blindsided. I had trusted them both with my life, with my love, and they had turned that trust into a weapon, wielding it to destroy everything I had believed in. Another message buzzed on my phone. This time from Mark, my business mentor. I read it with trembling hands. Deal sealed. You now have controlling interest in Madison Enterprises. Announcement next week. Congrats. The irony wasn't lost on me. Just as my life seemed to crumble into nothing, I had been handed the keys to an empire. A company that Ryan had worked for, fought for, and now was about to lose. The thought should have comforted me. But instead, it only amplified the storm brewing within me. The storm that had only just begun. I paused for a moment, letting the anger settle into something colder, something more deliberate. I had a plan now. But first, I needed to make them understand. As I opened my laptop and began drafting the emails, I knew one thing for sure. Ryan and Megan thought they had won. But they were about to learn that I didn't just play to win. I played to destroy those who thought they could break me. And so, the game began. I was standing at the edge of the cliff, staring into the unknown. My entire life had been thrown into disarray in a matter of hours. And now I had to make sense of it all. To take control before they realized the trap was already set. But before I could execute my next move, I needed more information. I needed to understand the full extent of their betrayal. I sat at my desk, hands shaking as I stared at the photos on my phone. Ryan and Megan, in my dress, looking so happy, so sure of themselves. But beneath that surface, a darkness was growing within me. They had betrayed me, not just as a fiancé and a sister, but as a person. This wasn't just about a wedding dress. It was about everything I had given to them. Trust, love, time, and now, I was going to take back what was rightfully mine. The phone rang again. It was Jessica. Her voice was firm when she spoke, but I could tell she was as rattled as I was. Sophia, we need to talk about this. You need to know everything, she said, her voice urgent. It's not just about the wedding dress. It's what Ryan has been hiding. I felt a cold wave of dread wash over me. What are you talking about? I asked, already fearing the answer. Ryan's been embezzling money from Madison Enterprises, she said, her words almost inaudible as they sank in. He's been moving millions through accounts. But they aren't in his name. They're in Megan's name. They've been running a fraud scheme. I was frozen, the words hitting me like a truck. I knew Ryan had been distant lately. But this was something I never imagined. My mind was reeling. Megan was involved, too. She had known. They had been running this entire con while I was out of the country, thinking I was doing business, while they were out there living my life, stealing my future. Sophia, we need to do something about this. Jessica's voice cut through my thoughts. I think you already know what you have to do. And I did. I had to expose them. But I wasn't going to do it recklessly. This was a game of strategy. And I was going to play it smarter than they ever could have imagined. It was time to start looking for leverage. I called my mentor, Mark. He had been with me for years, guiding me through the complexities of the business world. If anyone could help me with the next step, it was him. Sophia, I already knew about the fraud, Mark said when I told him about the situation. But I didn't know it had gotten this far. We need to move fast. I've already contacted an external auditor. His name is Daniel. He's been working on the case for a while now. The mention of Daniel made me feel slightly better. He was sharp, trusted, and had a reputation for getting results. If anyone could bring this house of cards down, it was him. The next morning, Daniel met me in my office. His presence was commanding, but there was something about the way he looked at me that made me feel as though I wasn't just his client, I was a partner in this. The moment he sat down, we started discussing the details. He opened a folder filled with documents, bank statements, wire transfers, financial reports. Everything was neatly laid out. But the numbers were staggering. Ryan has been funneling money into Megan's accounts for months, Daniel said, pointing to the documents. And from what I can see, he's been doing it with the intention of covering his tracks. But the transactions are too obvious. There's no way he can get away with this. You have the leverage now. I stared at the papers, feeling a mix of anger and disbelief. Megan, my own sister, had been complicit in this. She had been taken in by Ryan's charm, his promises, his lies, and now, she was part of something much darker than I ever could have imagined. Let's do it, I said, my voice steady with resolve. We're going to expose them both. Daniel smiled, almost as though he admired the calm determination I had found in myself. We'll present the evidence at the board meeting. It's time for Ryan to face the consequences. I knew I couldn't just take action without making sure everything was in place. I had to wait for the right moment. And that moment was coming. With every piece of evidence in my hands, I could feel the weight of what I was about to do. I had to play this carefully. But more than anything, I had to make them understand the price of their betrayal. And I was ready to collect. The day of the board meeting arrived. I had prepared myself for this moment, mentally, emotionally, and strategically. It wasn't about revenge anymore, it was about taking back control. The pieces of my life that had been stolen. The trust I had given to Ryan and Megan. It was all slipping through my fingers. But today I would make sure they understood the true cost of their actions. The office building felt different that morning. As I walked through the halls, the echo of my heels against the marble floor was the only sound. But it was steady, determined. I wasn't walking through the office to simply take my place. I was walking to reclaim everything that was mine. I entered the boardroom and took my seat at the head of the table, feeling a sense of purpose wash over me. As the executives trickled in, I noticed their uneasy glances. They knew something was coming, but they had no idea just how significant it would be. They had no idea what Ryan and Megan had done, but they would find out soon enough. Mark arrived just before the meeting began, a familiar presence of calm in the storm. He took his seat beside me, his quiet confidence reassuring. The rest of the board members settled in, and there was a certain tension in the air, an awareness that something was about to shift in a big way. Ryan walked in, his usual arrogance masking the unease in his eyes. He didn't yet know that this was the beginning of the end for him. Megan followed him in, looking like a deer caught in the headlights. The way they stood together, side by side, as if nothing had changed, made my blood run cold. They thought they were untouchable, but I was about to prove just how wrong they were. The meeting started with the usual pleasantries. But the moment Mark opened his mouth to address the financial issues plaguing the company, I knew the time had come. He glanced at me, a silent signal, and I nodded. Mark turned to the screen and began presenting the documents Daniel had compiled. The bank statements, the wire transfers, the fraudulent transactions, all laid bare for everyone to see. The silence in the room was palpable. Every person frozen in shock as the evidence mounted against Ryan and Megan. These funds were moved illegally, Mark said, his voice calm but filled with authority. And they were moved into accounts under Megan's name. The approval for each of these transfers can be traced back to Ryan. The room fell into an eerie hush. I could feel the eyes of the board members on me. But I didn't flinch. This wasn't about them. This was about justice. This was about holding Ryan and Megan accountable for everything they had stolen. Everything they had taken from me. Ryan's face turned ashen. He tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. He could feel the walls closing in on him. And for the first time in his life, he understood what it was like to be cornered. Megan looked like she might collapse. The guilt that had been weighing on her was finally catching up with her. But it didn't matter anymore. There was no way out. I spoke up, my voice cutting through the tension in the room. You may have thought you were clever, but you were wrong. This company, my future, my life, None of it was ever yours to take. And now, the truth is out. Ryan stood up abruptly, his chair scraping across the floor. This is a setup, he spat, his eyes wild with panic. You can't do this. I didn't steal anything. I met his gaze, my voice steady, unwavering. You didn't just steal money. Ryan, you stole trust. You stole my future, my love, my family, and now you'll pay the price for it. Megan, her face pale, stood by him but didn't speak. She knew the game was over. The weight of her silence was deafening. She had been complicit in this, enabling Ryan's fraud, and now it was too late to turn back. One of the senior executives spoke up, his voice trembling with disbelief. Is this true? Did you really do this? Ryan's eyes darted around the room, but there was no way to lie his way out of it now. The evidence was too overwhelming. As he stammered, trying to come up with a story that would save him, I could see his carefully crafted persona crumbling before him. The power he had once held was slipping away, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. Mark turned to the board members. We need to vote. It's time to remove Ryan from his position as CEO and ensure he is held accountable for his actions. I didn't need to say more. The decision was made swiftly. The vote passed unanimously. Ryan's face turned bright red with rage. And for a moment, I saw the monster he truly was. The man who thought he could deceive everyone, manipulate them, and get away with it. But today, his world had come crashing down. As the meeting ended, I remained in my seat, calm and composed. I had done what needed to be done. Ryan and Megan's betrayal had been exposed. And now it was time to move forward, to rebuild what they had tried to destroy. I knew this was only the beginning, but it felt like a victory. It wasn't just about business, it was about reclaiming my dignity, my power, and my future. As the dust settled from the board meeting, the weight of everything that had happened began to sink in. Ryan's fall from grace was complete, and Megan, while still reeling from her own guilt, had to confront the consequences of her actions. But for me, the real victory wasn't in watching them unravel. It was in reclaiming my life, my power, and my sense of self. Ryan would face the consequences of his embezzlement, and while Megan might never fully understand the depth of the pain she caused, she now had a chance to make things right. As for me, I wasn't just rebuilding a company. I was rebuilding myself. I'd learned that no matter how dark the situation seemed, there was always a way to rise above it. The day the news of Ryan's arrest hit the media, I stood outside the courthouse, knowing that this was a turning point. It wasn't about watching him suffer, it was about knowing that justice had been served. I had not only taken control of my future but also made sure no one could ever steal my happiness again. With everything in its rightful place, I felt a quiet sense of peace wash over me. The storm had passed, and as I walked away from the courthouse, I could finally see the future, my future, a future built on my own terms. With strength, clarity, and resilience. The betrayal had shaped me. Yes, but it no longer defined me. Thank you for following my journey. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more life stories and lessons on overcoming adversity. There are more stories to be shared, and I look forward to telling them all. Stay strong, stay focused, and never let anyone take away your power.